The laughter started small, like the crack of ice underfoot on a winter sidewalk. It grew until it filled the entire living room, bouncing off the beige walls and the family photos that still hung crooked from when we'd rushed to hang them after moving in. My wife, Sarah, wiped tears from her eyes, not from sadness, but from how hard she was laughing. My best friend since college, Mike, slapped his knee so hard I thought he'd bruise it. Even my sister-in-law, Lisa, who usually stayed quiet during these gatherings, covered her mouth and shook her head like I'd told the punchline of the century. "You're telling me," Sarah gasped between breaths, "that you think Mike and I have been, what, sneaking around for years, because he comes over to fix the sink once and brings me coffee sometimes. That's your big theory." Mike leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, grinning like a man who just won a bet he never made. "Dude, you've been watching too many late-night thrillers. Next you'll say the mailman is in on it." I sat there on the ottoman, hands clasped so tight my knuckles went white, feeling the heat crawl up my neck. I'd laid it out calmly, or as calmly as a man can when his world is tilting. The late nights Sarah claimed were book club. The way Mike's truck was always parked a block away when I came home early. The inside jokes that landed just a little too perfectly when the three of us were together. The way she'd touch his arm when she laughed, lingering a second longer than necessary. But the real clincher, the thing that had kept me awake for weeks, was the child. Our son, Ethan, 8 years old now, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a laugh that echoed Mike's exactly. I'd stared at old photos of myself at that age, brown eyes, straight nose, nothing like the boy who called me dad every morning. They laughed because I'd said it out loud, because in our quiet suburban neighborhood, big yards, minivans in driveways, the idea of betrayal that blatant sounded ridiculous, paranoid, crazy. I let them laugh. I smiled weakly, nodded, said something about maybe needing more sleep. Inside, the theory hardened into certainty. I wasn't crazy. I was awake. My name is Daniel Harper, 38 years old. I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm that designs office buildings and the occasional high-rise. Nothing glamorous but steady, predictable. The kind of job that lets you come home every night at 6:15, kiss your wife, ruffle your son's hair, and believe the life you've built is solid. Sarah and I met in our early 20s at a backyard barbecue thrown by mutual friends. She was bright, quick-witted, the kind of woman who could talk to anyone about anything. I was quieter, more methodical. We balanced each other, or so I thought. Mike entered the picture the same way most best friends do. College roommate, shared beers, shared secrets. After graduation, we all stayed in the same mid-sized city in the Midwest. Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony by a lake. Mike was my best man. When Ethan was born, Mike was there in the waiting room, packing with me, slapping my back when the nurse finally called me in. For years, everything felt right, until it didn't. The first real crack appeared about 2 years ago. Sarah started going to the gym more often. New workout clothes, new energy. I thought it was good. She was taking care of herself. Then came the text she angled away from me when we sat on the couch. The passwords changed on her phone. The nights she said she was meeting the girls, but came home smelling faintly of Mike's cologne, the same woodsy scent he'd worn since college. I ignored it at first, told myself I was projecting stress from work, but suspicion has a way of growing roots. One evening I found a receipt in her coat pocket for a hotel 2 towns over, lunch for two. The date matched a day she'd said she was at a conference. I confronted her gently. She laughed it off, said it was a work thing, client meeting she'd forgotten to mention. I let it go because love makes you stupid. But the doubts kept multiplying. I started noticing how Ethan never quite looked like me in family photos, how he had Mike's broad shoulders, the same dimple in his left cheek. I began collecting little things, a strand of Ethan's hair from his brush, a cheek swab I did while he slept feeling like the worst kind of villain, my own sample. I mailed them to a private lab that advertised discreet paternity testing. No names, just numbers. 6 weeks later, the envelope arrived. I opened it in the garage, engine off, radio silent. The results were clear in black and white. Probability of paternity, 0%. Ethan was not my son. The world didn't explode. It just folded in on itself. I sat there for an hour, staring at the paper until the words blurred. Then I folded it carefully, tucked it into my wallet, and went inside to make dinner like nothing had happened. Revenge isn't born in a flash of rage. It's cultivated slowly like a garden you tend in secret. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I smiled more. I told Sarah I loved her every day. I hugged Ethan tighter. And I planned. First, I needed proof beyond doubt. I already had the paternity test, but I wanted more. I hired a private investigator, a quiet ex-cop named Ramirez who specialized in domestic matters. He followed them for 3 months. Photos of Sarah and Mike at a coffee shop, hands touching across the table. Hotel receipts. A weekend trip to a cabin up north when Sarah told me she was visiting her sister. Audio from a bug I placed in Mike's truck, legal gray area, but I didn't care. Enough to bury them both if I wanted. But I didn't want a messy divorce war. I wanted precision. I wanted them to feel the same slow unraveling I'd endured. Step 1, secure my future. I quietly transferred assets. Our joint account stayed joint, but I opened new ones in my name only. I paid off the house in full using a bonus I'd hidden. I updated my will, nomming a trust for Ethan, but with conditions. If paternity was disproven, the trust redirected to charities for single parents. Sarah would get nothing beyond what state law required. Step 2, plant the seeds. I started dropping hints again, but softer this time. Ethan's been asking about family trees for school, I'd say casually. Maybe we should all do one of those DNA kits. Could be fun. Sarah's smile would tighten. Mike would change the subject. They laughed less each time. I waited until Ethan's 9th birthday. We threw a big party in the backyard, bounce house, cake shaped like a dinosaur, neighbors milling around with plastic cups of lemonade. Sarah was radiant in a sundress, playing perfect hostess. Mike showed up with a gift bag bigger than necessary, ruffling Ethan's hair like a proud uncle. After the cake, when everyone was full and distracted, I gathered the 3 of us, Sarah, Mike, and me, on the patio while Ethan played with friends. I got something for the family, I said, pulling out 3 small boxes. Inside each was a home DNA kit from a reputable company. Ethan's doing a heritage project. Thought it'd be cool if we all did it together. Results in a few weeks. Sarah's face went pale beneath her makeup. Dan, honey, those things aren't always accurate. Mike laughed, but it sounded forced. Yeah, man, you know how it is, Mail order science. I shrugged, humor me for Ethan. They took the kits. I watched them swab their cheeks, seal the envelopes. I mailed them myself the next day. The waiting was the hardest part. Every morning I woke up feeling like I was holding my breath. Sarah grew distant, checking her phone obsessively. Mike stopped coming over unannounced. I acted oblivious, kept the routine. Breakfast, work, dinner, bedtime stories. The results arrived on a Tuesday. 3 separate envelopes. I opened mine first, then Sarah's, then Mike's. The numbers didn't lie. Ethan matched Mike at 99.999% probability. Sarah matched as mother. I matched as nothing. I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out like a losing poker hand. When Sarah came home from work, I didn't say a word. I just slid the envelopes toward her. She read them once, twice. Her hands started shaking. Dan. I stood up. Don't. Mike arrived 20 minutes later. I'd texted him, come over. Important. He walked in looking like a man heading to his execution. I didn't yell. I spoke quietly, every word measured. You 2 thought I was crazy, paranoid. You laughed in my face. I tapped the papers. These don't laugh. Sarah started crying. Mike stared at the floor. I continued. I've known for months. I have photos, receipts, recordings. I could drag you both through court. Ruin your reputations, take everything. Sarah sobbed harder. Please, Dan, Ethan. Ethan is innocent, I said, and he'll stay that way, but you too. You don't get to walk away clean. My plan unfolded like clockwork. I filed for divorce the next week, citing irreconcilable differences. No public accusations, yet. I requested joint custody, but with a twist. I asked for primary physical custody during the school year. Sarah could have weekends. Mike, he wasn't family in the eyes of the law. I leaked nothing to friends or family. Instead, I let the truth spread slowly. A quiet conversation with my sister, a casual mention to our mutual friends over coffee. Turns out Ethan isn't mine biologically. Yeah, it's been rough. Word traveled. People who'd laughed at my theory now avoided eye contact with Sarah and Mike. Invitations dried up. Mike's business, he ran a small contracting firm, took a hit when clients started pulling jobs. Sarah's book club dissolved. No one said it outright, but the whispers were enough. The final piece came at the divorce hearing. Sarah and Mike had begged for mediation for privacy. I agreed, on condition they sign over the house to me outright and waive any claim to my retirement accounts. They did. They had no choice. On the day the decree was final, I invited them both to the house one last time. Ethan was at my sister's for the afternoon. I handed Sarah a folder. Inside, the DNA results, the PI photos, a copy of the new custody agreement. And one more thing, a letter from Ethan's pediatrician confirming he'd need ongoing medical care for a mild genetic condition that ran in Mike's family, not mine. I'd known about it for years. Now it was their problem to explain to insurance, to schools, to Ethan someday. Sarah looked up, eyes red. Why are you doing this? Because you laughed, I said. Because you let me raise a child who wasn't mine while you built a life on lies. Because I deserved better. Mike finally spoke. What happens now? You disappear from our lives except when necessary. You pay child support, Mike. Legally, you're on the hook now that paternity is established. Sarah, you get your weekends. But if either of you ever tries to turn Ethan against me or spin this like I'm the villain, I'll release everything. Every photo, every text, the whole ugly story. They left quietly. I stood in the empty living room, sunlight slanting through the windows. The house felt bigger without the weight of secrets. Months passed. Ethan adjusted. Kids are resilient. He calls me Dad still. One night he asked why Mommy and Uncle Mike don't come over together anymore. I told him grown-ups sometimes need space. He nodded, satisfied. Sarah moved to an apartment across town. Mike sold his business at a loss and relocated to another state. Last I heard, they weren't together anymore. The affair that had burned so hot couldn't survive the cold light of truth. Sometimes I think about that day in the living room when they laughed in denial. I don't feel rage anymore, just a quiet satisfaction. They laughed at my crazy theory. Until the DNA results arrived. And when the laughter stopped, the real story began. If you enjoyed this tale of betrayal and revenge, hit the subscribe button on Silent Payback Tales. More stories of justice served cold are on the way. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have done things differently?